Hello students, welcome back. In the chapter Force and Pressure, we learned about friction. When we kick a ball, the ball moves and then it stops. This is due to friction between the ball and the ground. We know that to stop a moving object, we should apply some force. In the case of rolling ball, this force is exerted by the ground on the ball in the opposite direction of its motion. This is the frictional force. When we apply brake, the vehicle stops. This is due to friction. Let's learn more about friction. Frictional force acts on a body moving over another body which opposes the relative motion. The frictional force always acts in the opposite direction of a moving object. Let's do one experiment on this. Place a book on a smooth tabletop. Then gently push this book to the right. Then the book moves towards right. Then it stops. This is due to the frictional force, and this frictional force acts in the opposite direction of its motion. That means if book moves towards right, the frictional force acts towards left. Now push the book towards left. Then the frictional force will act towards right and then the book stops. From this experiment, we can conclude that the frictional force always acts in the opposite direction of the moving object. The frictional force depends on two factors: nature of two surfaces and force with which two surfaces are pressed together. Let's learn more about this. The force of friction is different on different surfaces. Like friction is less on smooth surfaces and more on rough surfaces. Let's understand this through one experiment. Set up an inclined plane on a smooth tabletop by placing a wooden board supported by books. Now mark a line on the wooden board. Then place a pencil on the mark and allow it to move down. Mark the distance covered by the pencil. Now place a cloth over the tabletop. Avoid wrinkles on the cloth. Now repeat the same activity by placing a pencil on the mark and allow it to move down. Then mark the distance covered by the pencil. Compare the two distances. From this, we can clearly see that the pencil in the first activity moves longer than the second activity. This is because when we place the cloth over the tabletop, that will reduce the smoothness of the surface and then it increases the friction. That is why the pencil can't move further. From this, we can conclude that the friction is less on smooth surfaces and more on rough surfaces. The friction force is there due to the interlocking of irregularities on the surfaces. For example, take the case of the book placed on a tabletop. Now, even though the book and the table look smooth, they have minute irregularities on their surfaces. These irregularities, this is the book surface and this is the table surface. Now, these irregularities, they interlock between each other. This interlocking will cause the friction. On rough surfaces, this interlocking will be more due to larger number of irregularities and the friction will be more. But on smooth surfaces, the irregularities are less, then the frictional force is less. When two surfaces are pressed together, that will increase the interlocking of the irregularities on the surfaces. Hence, the friction increased. These are two boxes of equal size, but one is heavy and one is light-weighted. If we try to push these boxes, what do you think? Which box will move easily? The light-weighted one. As the light-weighted box press the surface with less force and hence the interlocking between the irregularities is not so tight. So if we apply a small force, that is enough to overcome the interlocking. Hence the box can move easily. But in the case of the heavy box, it presses the floor with more force and hence the interlocking between the irregularities is more. So if we want to push the box, we need to apply a force which is more than that of the interlocking. Hence it is hard to push the heavy weighted one, and here the friction is more. In the case of the heavy box, friction is more, and in the case of the light box, friction is less. Let's learn about the types of friction. There are three types of friction: static friction, sliding friction, and rolling friction. Let's go into details. Static friction. We can see a lot of things at rest in our home, like a table, a chair, and a laptop, etc. All these things are at rest due to some force acting on it. This force is called the static friction. Static friction is the force that keeps an object at rest. So here this man is trying to push a heavy box. If he wants to push the heavy box, he needs to apply a force which is more than that of the static friction. Then only the box can move. If you try to rub your hands, you can feel some heat. This heat is produced due to sliding friction. Sliding friction takes place when two surfaces are sliding against each other. A kid is playing in the slide. When the kid is playing in the absence of friction, she will move fastly and will fall down. Due to sliding friction, she can move safely as this sliding friction provides some resistance. Now rolling friction. A truck is moving on the road and the tires of the truck is rolling over the road. Here a friction is coming to action. The force is acting when a body rolls over the surface of another, that is called rolling friction. Friction is a necessary evil. Friction is very important in our day-to-day activities, but at the same time, it has some harmful effects. Let's look into the advantages of friction. We can hold a pot due to the friction between our hands and the pot. We can walk on the ground due to friction. You all know that it is very hard to walk on a slippery road or a wet marble floor. This is due to less friction. We can light a matchstick due to friction. When we rub the matchstick over the matchbox, then the rubbing action will produce heat and this heat will burn the phosphorus and it catches fire. A car stops by applying brake. This is due to friction. Now let's learn about the disadvantages of friction. It wears out the screws and soles of our shoes. Heat generated due to friction is a wastage of energy. For example, when we run the mixer for a few seconds or few minutes, it becomes hot. This is a wastage of energy and it will reduce the efficiency of the machines. There are some methods to increase the friction. Soles of our shoes are made of grooves. This is to increase the friction so we can get more grip on slippery grounds. Threaded tires are there to increase the friction. This threaded tires will increase the friction, that will increase the grip of the vehicle on the ground. You might be familiar with the kabaddi players rubbing their hands with sand to get more grip on the opponent. There are some methods to reduce friction. By sprinkling some powder on the carom board, we can reduce the friction and the coins can move easily and fastly. By applying oil on the hinges of the door, it can move easily. Oil, grease or graphite is applied between the moving parts of machines. When we apply this oil and graphite, it will form a layer and that will reduce the rubbing between the surfaces and hence the friction. You all might have noticed that the big luggage bags are attached to rollers. This is to reduce friction. You know that sliding friction is greater than rolling friction. Here the sliding friction is converted into rolling friction. Rolling friction is less and we can carry these luggages or push or pull the luggages very easily. This principle is used in ball bearings. Ball bearings are metal rings and inside it metal bolts are there, and these ball bearings are inserted in between the hub of the wheel and axle of cycle. When the cycle revolves, this ball bearing moves and it will reduce the friction. Here sliding friction is converted into rolling friction. Let's move on to fluid friction. In science, we call liquids and gases together as fluids. And when an object passes through these fluids, this fluid will exert a force, that is fluid friction. And this fluid friction depends on some factors like the speed of an object with respect to the fluid, size and shape of an object, and nature of the fluid. Higher the speed, the greater will be the friction. If the object is moving very fastly, then the friction will be more, like in an aeroplane. Larger the size, greater the friction, like in a ship. Ship is very large and when the size increases, friction also increases. Viscosity of the fluid, that means if the thickness of the fluid is more, then the friction is more. When an object passes through an oil, it will experience more friction than in water as the oil is more viscous than water. Now let's learn about the methods to reduce the fluid friction. A streamlined body shape can reduce the fluid friction. We know that birds can fly faster in the air. This is due to the streamlined body nature. And because of this reason, scientists have given This aeroplane is streamlined shape to reduce the friction and move faster in the air. And the nature had given the fishes streamlined body. Because of this streamlined body, the fishes can move or swim fastly in the water. And the man-made boats and ships also have streamlined body to reduce the friction in water. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please share it with your friends. If you have any queries, put it in the comment box. Thank you.